Before the first light of dawn touches the Serengeti, a sound emerges that is not merely a noise, but a physical force, a low-frequency vibration that can be felt in the chest of any creature within 5 miles. It is the roar of a king, a sonic declaration of ownership that defines the very boundaries of existence in the African wild. To understand the lion is to understand the concept of absolute sovereignty. They are the only truly social felids on Earth, a biological anomaly in a world of solitary hunters. While the leopard stalks the shadows alone and the cheetah relies on the frantic grace of the sprint, the lion has mastered something far more complex, the art of the collective. They do not just inhabit the savanna, they govern it. This dominance is not merely a matter of muscle and claw, though their physical presence is staggering. A mature male lion can weigh nearly 500 pounds, a concentrated mass of fast-twitch muscle fibers designed for explosive power. But their true crown lies in their evolutionary specialization. Consider the mane, a feature often viewed through a lens of mere aesthetics. In reality, the mane is a high-stakes biological billboard. Recent studies suggest the darkness and density of a male's mane are direct indicators of his testosterone levels and nutritional health. It is a visual language, a way of communicating fitness and dominance to rivals and potential mates without a single drop of blood being spilled. Yet this majesty hides a staggering physiological cost. The lion is a masterpiece of energy management. They are feast or famine specialists. Unlike the constant, rhythmic hunting of a wolf pack, a lion's life is defined by long stretches of profound lethargy, punctuated by moments of terrifying, high-octane violence. They spend up to 20 hours a day in a state of near dormancy, a biological necessity to conserve the massive caloric reserves required to take down prey as large as a Cape buffalo. Their sensory world is equally profound. While we see the savanna through color and light, the lion perceives it through a complex tapestry of chemical and acoustic signals. Their olfactory bulbs are highly developed, allowing them to read the history of a landscape through scent marks left on acacia trees, a map of territories, family lineages, and approaching threats. Even their hearing is tuned to the infrasonic. They can detect the low-frequency rumbles of distant storms or the heavy, rhythmic footfalls of migrating herds long before they appear on the horizon. In this golden age, the lion sits at the center of a perfectly calibrated machine. They are the apex, the regulators of the ecosystem, ensuring that no single herbivore species overgrazes the plains, thereby maintaining the delicate balance of the vegetation that supports all life. When the lion thrives, the savanna breathes. When the lion is present, the rhythm of the wild is unbroken. But this crown, heavy with the responsibility of survival and the burden of biological perfection, is more fragile than it appears. To witness the lion in its prime is to witness a kingdom at its zenith, unaware that the very foundations of its throne are beginning to tremble. But how did nature forge such a specialized instrument of dominion? To look closely at the lion is to realize that they are not merely predators. They are a convergence of evolutionary breakthroughs, a biological toolkit honed by millions of years of relentless selection. While most felids have evolved for the solitary ambush, the lion's anatomy has been sculpted for the heavy-duty struggle. Their skeletal structure is a marvel of compromise between strength and flexibility. Unlike the lightweight, gracile frame of the cheetah, which is built for the fragile precision of speed, the lion possesses a robust, dense bone structure capable of absorbing the massive kinetic energy generated during a collision with a 1,000-pound zebra. Their forelimbs are disproportionately powerful, equipped with retractable claws that function less like surgical scalpels and more like heavy-duty grappling hooks, designed to anchor a thrashing, panicked victim to the earth. This physical power is underpinned by a neurological specialization in sensory processing. Consider the tapetum lucidum, the reflective layer behind the retina. While many nocturnal hunters possess this, the lion's is tuned to an extraordinary degree, allowing them to gather the faintest traces of moonlight to create a hyper-lucid view of the dark. This is paired with a specialized auditory system capable of detecting ultrasonic frequencies, allowing them to hear the subtle, high-pitched rustle of a rodent or the frantic heartbeat of a cornered calf. They do not just see and hear the savanna, they experience it in high definition, even in the dead of night. Perhaps the most profound evolutionary mastery, however, lies in their metabolic efficiency. The lion is a master of the anaerobic burst. Their muscle tissue is uniquely adapted to handle massive spikes in lactic acid, allowing them to perform feats of incredible explosive power that would cause most mammals to collapse from exhaustion. This is the biological nitro boost that allows a lion to transition from a state of deep sleep to a lethal, high-velocity strike in a matter of seconds. But there is a hidden complexity in their very blood. Recent genomic studies have begun to reveal that lions possess unique adaptations in their immune systems and wound-healing processes. In a world where a single scratch from a buffalo's horn can lead to a fatal infection, the lion's ability to rapidly close tissue and combat pathogens is a critical evolutionary safeguard. They are built to endure the damage that comes with being at the top of the food chain. Even their sociality is an evolutionary gamble that has paid off. The transition from solitary hunting to the pride structure required a massive leap in cognitive evolution. To hunt as a unit, lions must possess a level of social intelligence, the ability to read the body language of a sibling, to predict the movement of a partner, and to suppress individual aggression for the sake of the group's caloric success. This is social intelligence turned into a survival mechanism. They are a masterpiece of biological engineering, a predator designed to occupy every niche of the apex role. Every muscle fiber, every sensory nerve, and every social instinct has been fine-tuned to ensure that the lion remains the undisputed master of the plains. They are the pinnacle of what it means to be a hunter, a perfect storm of anatomy and instinct. Yet, as we shall see, even the most perfect design can be undone when the environment it was built for begins to vanish. If the lion is a masterpiece of biological engineering, then the pride is the complex machine that puts that engineering to work. But what exactly constitutes the blueprint of a lion's kingdom? To the untrained eye, a pride looks like a simple family unit, a collection of golden bodies lounging in the shade. In reality, it is one of the most sophisticated and high-stakes social architectures in the animal kingdom, a calculated fusion of kinship, territory, and shared survival. At the heart of this architecture lies a fundamental biological truth. The pride is, at its core, a matriarchy. While the males provide the heavy artillery, the muscle, and the defense, the females are the architects, the historians, and the primary engine of the pride's continuity. Most lionesses within a pride are related, often sharing a common maternal lineage that stretches back through generations. This isn't merely a coincidence of proximity, it is a strategic biological alliance. By living in a network of sisters, cousins, and aunts, these females create a collective intelligence. They share the burden of nursing, a phenomenon known as communal cub-rearing, where multiple females may nurse offspring that are not biologically their own. This shared investment increases the survival rate of the next generation, ensuring that the pride's genetic legacy persists even when individual mothers face hardship. This social cohesion extends into the very way they manage their resources. Unlike solitary hunters who must gamble on every single kill, the pride functions as a cooperative economic unit. They operate on a principle of shared risk and shared reward. When a pride brings down a massive buffalo, the success is not measured by the individual, but by the caloric stability of the group. This requires a level of sophisticated communication that goes far beyond simple vocalizations. It involves a complex language of scent marking, facial expressions, and subtle postural shifts that signal intent, dominance, or submission. However, this architecture is not built on peace alone. It is built on a delicate, often violent equilibrium. The pride is a tiered hierarchy where every member must know their place to prevent internal collapse. While the females provide the stability, the males provide the perimeter. The presence of dominant males creates a protective umbrella over the pride, but this service comes at a staggering cost. The male's role is one of constant, high-intensity vigilance. They are the frontline defense against nomadic males and rival coalitions, tasked with holding a territory that is perpetually under threat of siege. Furthermore, the pride is not a static entity. It is a dynamic, shifting mosaic. It is composed of a core of related females, supplemented by transient males who arrive and depart in cycles of conquest and exile. This constant influx of new genetic material, though often through brutal means, is essential to prevent the very thing that destroys many isolated populations: genetic stagnation. To understand the pride is to understand that it is more than just a group of animals. It is a living, breathing social organism. It is a fortress of blood and bone, designed to turn individual vulnerability into collective strength. It is the platform upon which the lion's dominion is built. But even the most fortified social structure has a breaking point, and the stability of the pride is only as strong as the land that supports it. To understand how this fortress of blood and bone functions, we must look beyond what the human eye can see. We must step into a reality where the landscape is not merely a collection of grass and stone, but a vibrating, scented tapestry of data. For the lion, the world is not a visual spectacle. It is a sensory deluge, a high-definition broadcast of information transmitted through sound, scent, and touch. While we perceive the savanna through the light hitting our retinas, a lion perceives it through the chemical signatures left in the wind. Their sense of smell is their primary map. Through the vomeronasal organ, a specialized sensory structure located in the roof of the mouth, lions engage in a process called the flamen response. When a lion curls its upper lip in a grimace, it isn't a gesture of disgust. It is a sophisticated biological scan. They are literally tasting the air, pulling pheromones into a specialized cavity to decode the hormonal status of a rival, the reproductive readiness of a female, or the lingering ghost of a predator that passed by hours ago. To a lion, a scent trail is a written history, a chronological record of who has been here, how strong they were, and how long ago they departed. But if scent is their map, then sound is their radar. The lion's roar is perhaps the most iconic sound in nature, but its purpose is far more tactical than mere intimidation. A lion's roar can reach a staggering 114 decibels and carry for over 5 miles. This is not just a declaration of presence, it is a long-distance acoustic boundary. Through these low-frequency vibrations, lions communicate across vast distances, allowing prides to coordinate without physical contact and warning nomadic males that the territory is occupied. Interestingly, the roar serves as a biological fingerprint. The specific frequency and cadence can convey the size and health of the individual, allowing rivals to assess the cost of a potential confrontation before a single claw is unsheathed. As the sun dips below the horizon, the lion's visual world undergoes a radical transformation. While humans struggle in the twilight, the lion enters its prime. Their eyes are equipped with a tapetum lucidum, a reflective layer of tissue behind the retina that acts like a biological mirror. This layer reflects light back through the photoreceptors, effectively doubling the lion's ability to capture every stray photon of moonlight. This gives them a massive advantage in the gray hours of dawn and dusk, the windows of time where they can ambush prey that is still transitioning between day and night modes. Yet, even this nocturnal advantage has limits. The lion's sensory world is a constant negotiation between different inputs. They must balance the visual cues of a stalking zebra with the olfactory warnings of a distant hyena, all while remaining attuned to the subtle tactile shifts in the wind. This sensory integration is what allows them to operate as a single, cohesive unit during a hunt. They are not just seeing the prey, they are feeling the rhythm of the environment. This hyper-awareness is the lion's greatest tool for dominance, but it is also a heavy burden. To live in a world of constant, high-fidelity input is to live in a state of perpetual vigilance. Every scent is a potential threat. Every sound is a potential challenge. This sensory intensity is the heartbeat of the kingdom, the invisible thread that connects the predator to the prey and the king to his land. But what happens when the sensory data changes? What happens when the very heartbeat of the savanna shifts its tempo? To survive, the lion must do more than just sense the world. They must dance to its pulse. This is the rhythm of the wild, a complex, cyclical symphony governed by the unrelenting movement of water, the tilt of the earth, and the ancient migrations of the herds. In the lion's kingdom, there is no such thing as a static environment. There is only the ebb and the flow. The rhythm begins with the rain. In the African savanna, water is the ultimate conductor of life. When the dry season reaches its zenith, the landscape becomes a parched, silent stage. Rivers shrink into muddy veins, and the scent maps of the lions become localized and concentrated around the few remaining watering holes. During these lean months, the rhythm is slow, heavy, and desperate. Energy is conserved, movement is minimized. The lions become ghosts, lurking in the shadows of acacia trees, waiting for the inevitable arrival of the herds that follow the scent of moisture. Then the clouds gather. The first thunderclap is the opening note of a new movement. When the rains arrive, they trigger a biological explosion. The dormant seeds of the savanna germinate in a matter of days, turning the dust into a sea of emerald. This sudden surge of vegetation triggers a cascading effect through the trophic levels. Insects bloom, followed by small mammals, which in turn draw in the great ungulates, the wildebeest, the zebra, the buffalo. This is the period of seasonal abundance, the crescendo of the lion's world. For a pride, this is the golden window of opportunity. The density of prey reaches a peak, and for a brief period, the energetic cost of hunting drops significantly. It is during these months of plenty that the biological machinery of the pride accelerates. Cub-rearing peaks, successful litters are more likely to survive, and the pride can afford the luxury of social cohesion. The rhythm here is fast, frantic, and fertile. However, there is a hidden mathematical precision to this abundance. Ecologists refer to this as pulse reserve dynamics. The lions are not just reacting to the rain, they are anticipating the pulse. They have evolved to synchronize their reproductive cycles with these windows of high resource availability. A lioness's ability to provide milk to a growing litter is directly tied to her ability to capitalize on the seasonal surge of protein. If the timing is off, if the rains are late or the migration falters, the rhythm breaks, and the consequences are lethal. Yet this rhythm is not merely a cycle of life, it is a cycle of intense competition. As the herds congregate, so do the predators. The abundance of prey brings a secondary, more violent rhythm, the seasonal surge in predator density. Hyenas, leopards, and even rival lion prides arrive in waves, turning the feast into a battlefield. The peak of the season is often the most dangerous time for a cub, as the sheer number of competitors reaches its highest point. To live as a lion is to be a master of this timing. They are biological clockwork, tuned to the subtle shifts in wind, humidity, and the migratory patterns of millions. They do not fight the rhythm, they become part of it. But as we will see, even the most perfect rhythm can be disrupted when the music of the natural world begins to fade. But what is the price of such perfection? To be at the absolute summit of the food chain is to live within a biological contradiction. a state of existence we call the apex paradox. It is the fundamental struggle of a creature that must be both a master of immense power and a slave to its own metabolic demands. In the natural world, dominance is not a static trophy. It is a high-stakes transaction that must be paid for every single day. The lion is a biological heavyweight, built for explosive, catastrophic power. Their musculature is designed for the sudden, violent burst of a chase, and their skeletal structure is optimized to wrestle megaherbivores that weigh 10 times their own mass. But this specialized machinery comes with a crushing evolutionary tax, an incredibly inefficient metabolic rate. Unlike the cheetah, which is a precision instrument of speed, or the hyena, a tireless endurance scavenger, the lion is an energy glutton. A single successful hunt provides a massive influx of calories, but the sheer cost of the pursuit and the physical toll of the kill is astronomical. To maintain their massive frames and the hormonal surges required to defend a territory, lions must consume staggering amounts of protein. On average, a large male may require up to 7 kilograms of meat every single day just to maintain equilibrium. If they fail to meet this threshold, the king does not merely become hungry, he begins to consume himself. The body enters a state of catabolic breakdown, where muscle tissue is cannibalized to fuel the brain and heart. The very strength that allows them to rule becomes the weight that drags them toward starvation. This paradox extends into the realm of sociality. The lion is the only truly social felid, a trait that is both their greatest shield and their greatest liability. While the pride structure allows for the cooperative hunting of massive prey like buffalo, it also creates a density-dependent trap. A pride is a collective of mouths that must be fed, and as the pride grows in size and social complexity, its caloric requirements grow exponentially. A large, successful pride becomes a target of its own success. The more lions they produce, the more prey they must kill, and the more they attract the attention of rival coalitions and scavenging competitors. Furthermore, there is the metabolic cost of dominance itself. For a male lion, the throne is a physiological furnace. The testosterone required to maintain the aggression necessary to hold a pride is metabolically expensive and physically taxing. It suppresses the immune system and accelerates cellular aging. The most powerful lions often have the shortest lifespans, their bodies burning out like a high-performance engine pushed too hard for too long. The apex paradox is the silent, mathematical truth underlying every roar heard on the savanna. The lion lives on a razor's edge, balanced between the glory of absolute dominance and the crushing reality of biological debt. They are the masters of their domain, yet they are perpetually one failed hunt away from total collapse. They are kings, yes, but they are kings who are constantly running out of time and running out of fuel. If the male lion is the engine of the pride's defense, then the lionesses are its very soul. While the cinematic image of the lion is often defined by the golden mane and the thunderous roar of a king, this is a grand illusion. In the intricate machinery of the pride, the males are often transient, volatile, and prone to sudden displacement. The true stability, the enduring continuity, and the fundamental intelligence of the pride reside within a silent, unbreakable foundation: the matriarchal core. A pride is not merely a random collection of individuals. It is a sophisticated, multi-generational corporation of females. These lionesses are often sisters, mothers, aunts, and cousins, bound by blood and a shared evolutionary memory. While males are frequently driven out by younger, more violent coalitions, the females tend to stay within their natal territories for their entire lives. This creates a biological phenomenon known as philopatrwy, a deep-seated loyalty to a specific landscape. Because they do not wander, the females become the living archives of the savanna. They know where the water holds longest in a drought. They know which thickets provide the best cover for a stalking hunt. They know the subtle rhythms of the local prey migrations. This shared knowledge is the pride's most valuable currency. It is passed down through social learning, a cognitive feat rarely seen in the feline world. When a young lioness observes an elder successfully navigating a landscape of scarcity, she is not just watching a hunt. She is downloading a survival manual. But their role goes far deeper than mere geography. The matriarchy is the pride's tactical command center. While the males provide the heavy artillery, the sheer physical presence required to ward off hyenas and rival males, the females are the precision strike team. They operate with a level of coordinated social intelligence that defies the stereotype of the solitary cat. During a hunt, they do not simply chase. They communicate through subtle body language and scent, executing complex encirclement tactics, where certain individuals act as wings to flush prey toward a central ambush point. Furthermore, the matriarchy governs the pride's reproductive economy. Lionesses exhibit a remarkable biological strategy called synchronous estrus. In many prides, the females will enter heat at roughly the same time. This leads to the communal rearing of cubs, a phenomenon known as creche behavior. By nursing and protecting each other's offspring, the females increase the survival probability of the entire lineage. This cooperative breeding ensures that even if one mother is injured or exhausted, the collective will step in to safeguard the next generation. This social cohesion is the only thing standing between the pride and total dissolution. Without the matriarchal bond, a pride is just a group of hungry individuals waiting to be picked apart by scavengers. The females provide the social glue that allows the pride to function as a single, multi-headed organism. They are the strategists, the historians, and the nurturers. If the male is the king who holds the crown, the lionesses are the kingdom itself. They are the quiet, calculating force that ensures that even when a king falls, the lineage endures. They are the heartbeat of the pride, and without them, the golden age of the lion would have ended long ago. But what of the king who sits atop this intricate foundation? If the lionesses are the kingdom, the male is its most precarious inhabitant. We often view the lion through a lens of effortless majesty, yet for the dominant male, the crown is not a symbol of status, but a heavy, exhausting weight. To hold a pride is to exist in a state of perpetual, high-stakes vigilance. The life of a pride leader is defined by a paradox. He is the most powerful individual in the ecosystem, yet he is also the most biologically vulnerable. While the lionesses focus on the rhythmic, calculated task of hunting and rearing, the male's existence is a relentless marathon of defense. His primary role is not to provide food. In fact, he is often the last to eat, but to serve as a living fortress. He must defend the pride's borders against rival coalitions, and more importantly, against the relentless, opportunistic onslaught of spotted hyenas. This constant state of readiness comes at a staggering physiological cost. To maintain his dominance, the male must engage in frequent, violent territorial disputes. These are not mere skirmishes. They are life-or-death battles that leave scars, broken teeth, and deep-seated infections. Even more taxing is the hormonal toll. The sheer volume of testosterone required to maintain his aggressive posture and physical mass creates a biological burnout. High testosterone levels are linked to increased cortisol, the stress hormone, meaning the king is quite literally living on the edge of physiological collapse. There is also a hidden cost to his very appearance. The iconic mane, which we associate with strength, is actually a biological signal of his fitness and a target for his enemies. Studies have shown that a darker, thicker mane can indicate higher testosterone and better nutrition, making him a more formidable opponent. However, a dark mane also makes him more visible to competitors and can lead to overheating during the midday heat. He is caught in an evolutionary arms race, where his greatest asset is also his greatest liability. Perhaps the most brutal aspect of his burden is the looming shadow of succession. Unlike the matriarchal core, which is built on permanence, the male's tenure is almost always temporary. He is a placeholder in a cycle of violent turnover. In the wild, a coalition of younger, stronger males is constantly patrolling the fringes of his territory, waiting for the moment his strength wanes or an injury slows him down. When a new coalition successfully ousts a king, the transition is rarely peaceful. It is a period of profound biological trauma. The new males often engage in infanticide, killing the existing cubs to force the lionesses back into estrus. This ensures that the new kings can sire their own bloodline immediately, but it leaves the pride in a state of social and reproductive chaos. The king lives in a state of magnificent isolation. He is part of the pride, yet he is fundamentally different. He is a specialist in conflict, a guardian whose very presence is a deterrent. He is the shield that takes the blows so the heart of the pride can keep beating. He is the apex of evolution, but his throne is built on sand, and the price of his reign is a life of constant, unrelenting war. But how does a single, solitary male survive a world designed to unseat him? If the lone king is a fortress, then the force that eventually brings him down is often not a single enemy, but a coordinated army. In the brutal mathematics of the savannah, one is rarely enough. While a single male may hold a pride through sheer brute force, he is an evolutionary underdog against the rising tide of brotherhood. This is the phenomenon of the coalition, the most sophisticated and lethal social unit in the feline world. Unlike the matriarchal pride, which is built on kinship and the shared labor of motherhood, a male coalition is a tactical alliance born of necessity. Most often, these are brothers, siblings raised in the same pride who, upon reaching sexual maturity, are driven out into the harsh, nomadic life of the wasteland. Separately, they are vulnerable, easy prey for hyenas or lone rivals. Together, they become an unstoppable engine of conquest. These coalitions are not merely groups of lions, they are highly specialized combat units. Research suggests that the effectiveness of a coalition does not scale linearly, but exponentially. A pair of brothers can defend a territory significantly larger and more resource-rich than any single male could dream of holding. A trio, however, creates a tactical hegemony. They can patrol vast borders, engage multiple rivals simultaneously, and, most importantly, provide the sheer physical mass required to repel a large-scale takeover. There is a profound biological intelligence at play here. In many successful coalitions, there is a discernible division of labor. One male may act as the primary enforcer, the heavy hitter in physical confrontations, while another excels in the subtle, high-stakes game of scent marking and territorial patrolling. This synergy allows them to maintain a buffer zone around their kingdom, detecting intruders long before a fight even begins. But the bond of a coalition is often more than just shared DNA. It is a shared survival strategy. In the high-stakes gambling of lion politics, the coalition effect alters the very landscape of the pride. When a brother group enters a territory, they don't just challenge the king, they overwhelm the social structure itself. They possess the numbers to withstand the burnout mentioned before, sharing the physiological burden of defense. If one male is injured or exhausted by the cortisol-heavy demands of leadership, the others can step in, maintaining the shield of the pride. Yet this blood bond is a double-edged sword. The very strength of the coalition creates an intense evolutionary pressure on the rest of the ecosystem. Large, stable coalitions can suppress the reproductive success of neighboring prides, creating dead zones where no other males can establish themselves. This leads to a fragmented landscape of powerful, localized dynasties, separated by vast, empty corridors. As these brotherhoods rise, the era of the lone king draws to a close. The transition from a solitary ruler to a coalition-led regime is the most violent shift in the lion's life cycle. It is a shift from individual dominance to collective power, a move from the rule of the man to the rule of the pack. In the world of the lion, blood may make you kin, but it is the coalition that makes you a god. But what happens to the young, the restless, and the dispossessed before they become gods? If the coalition is the instrument of conquest, then the rite of passage is the crucible that forges it. For a young male lion, the transition from the sheltered warmth of the pride to the unforgiving reality of the wasteland is not a choice. It is a biological sentence. This is the moment the golden life of a cub is stripped away, replaced by a desperate, high-stakes gamble for existence. As they approach 3 or 4 years of age, a physiological shift begins. The mane, that iconic dark halo, starts to sprout, signaling a surge in testosterone that fundamentally rewires their behavior. But this hormonal surge is a curse as much as a blessing. It triggers an intense aggression and a drive for status that makes them increasingly incompatible with the very pride that raised them. The matriarchal core, the engine of the pride, will eventually sense this volatility. Through subtle social cues or outright physical expulsion, the young males are cast out. They are no longer sons, they are competitors. Suddenly, the world shrinks. The lush, resource-rich territory of their birth is replaced by the nomadic fringe, a lawless expanse of scrubland and dust where every shadow hides a threat. For a lone subadult, the statistics are grim. Without a pride to provide food or a coalition to provide defense, the mortality rate for dispersing males is staggering. They enter a period of extreme physiological stress. Their cortisol levels, the body's primary stress hormone, spike to levels that can actually suppress their immune systems, making them susceptible to infections and parasites that a resident lion would easily shrug off. To survive this period, they must master a new, silent language of survival. They learn to navigate the scentscape, reading the chemical signatures left on trees and rocks to avoid established territories. They learn the art of the opportunistic scavenge, often stealing kills from smaller predators or even raiding the kills of hyenas, a dangerous game of high risk, low reward. Yet within this chaos, a biological imperative drives them toward one another. This is where the true rite of passage occurs, the formation of the bond. It is a rare and delicate social alchemy. 2 or 3 males, often brothers, must find one another in the vastness. They must undergo a period of mutual testing, a series of low-level skirmishes and grooming sessions to establish a hierarchy that won't collapse into lethal violence when a real threat arrives. Scientific observations suggest that these early associations are critical for long-term neurological development. The ability to cooperate, to suppress the urge to kill a sibling, and to coordinate movement is a cognitive feat that requires intense social learning during these nomadic years. A male who fails to master this social intelligence is destined to remain a wanderer, a ghost in the grass, until he eventually succumbs to the elements. The rite of passage is, therefore, a filter of evolutionary excellence. It prunes the weak, the solitary, and the uncoordinated from the gene pool. Only those who can navigate the transition from the safety of the pride to the brotherhood of the coalition will ever taste the milk of the matriarchs or the glory of the throne. They emerge from the wasteland no longer as children, but as architects of their own destiny, ready to turn the tide of politics and claim a kingdom of their own. But what is the true cost of a crown? In the natural world, the transition from nomadic wanderer to reigning monarch is rarely a peaceful coronation. It is a violent, biological reset. When a new coalition of males finally breaches the borders of an established pride, they do more than just seize territory. They execute a cold, calculated strategy that ensures their own genetic dominance. This is the phenomenon of infanticide, one of the most brutal yet evolutionarily efficient mechanisms in the animal kingdom. To a human observer, the sight of a new king turning on the offspring of his predecessor is an act of pure malice. But in the ruthless logic of the savannah, it is a biological necessity. The existing cubs in the pride are the living legacy of the deposed males. As long as they live, they represent a biological dead end for the new kings. More importantly, the presence of nursing cubs keeps the lionesses in a state of reproductive dormancy. A female nursing a cub is not ovulating. Her body is focused entirely on the survival of the existing offspring. By eliminating the current generation, the new males trigger an immediate hormonal shift in the females. Within days of the cubs' deaths, the lionesses enter estrus, becoming receptive to the new coalition. This ensures that the pride's next generation will carry the DNA of the victors rather than the losers. It is a grim way to restart the clock, but it ensures that the lineage of the throne is never diluted by the ghosts of the past. This cycle of violence creates a profound succession crisis that dictates the very rhythm of pride life. For the lionesses, this is a period of intense psychological and physiological trauma. Research into lion social structures suggests that females may exhibit maternal buffering, an attempt to hide or protect their cubs from the encroaching males, but in the face of a dominant coalition, resistance is often futile. This creates a demographic vacuum. A pride can go from a thriving community to a group of barren females in a single season. Yet the brutality of succession is not just about the death of the young, it is about the precariousness of the old. The reign of a coalition is rarely eternal. Because the energy required to maintain a territory is so immense, a king's reign is often a race against time. As they age, their manes darken, a sign of high testosterone, but their physical prowess begins to wane. A darker mane can actually serve as a biological warning, signaling to rivals that the male is a formidable opponent, but it also attracts more challengers. The succession is a constant, shifting equilibrium. When a coalition is ousted, the cycle of infanticide begins anew, erasing the previous era with clinical precision. This creates a boom and bust cycle of population density within the pride. It is a high-stakes game where the prize is immortality through offspring, and the penalty for failure is the total erasure of one's bloodline. In the kingdom of the lion, power is never truly owned. It is merely borrowed, held through strength, and eventually paid back in blood. But if the takeover is a blunt instrument of violence, how do the survivors manage the delicate, invisible architecture of what comes after? If the coup is the storm, then diplomacy is the treacherous calm that follows. In the wake of a bloody takeover, the new kings do not rule through strength alone. They must navigate a complex web of social signaling and shifting loyalties to prevent their kingdom from collapsing from within. This is the realm of lion diplomacy, a subtle, high-stakes game of scent, posture, and strategic tolerance. To understand the politics of a pride, one must look past the roar and into the silent language of the matriarchy. While the males hold the borders, the lionesses hold the social glue. They are the architects of the pride's internal peace. Through a series of nuanced behaviors, allogrooming, head-rubbing, and synchronized resting, the females establish a hierarchy that minimizes energy-wasting conflict. This social cohesion is not merely about friendship. It is a survival mechanism. A pride that is fractured by internal bickering is a pride that cannot hunt effectively, and a pride that cannot hunt is a pride that dies. However, this peace is often a facade, masking a constant struggle for influence. Within the female hierarchy, there is a subtle, lifelong competition for social capital. Dominant females often secure preferential access to kills, ensuring their offspring have the highest chance of survival. This creates a tiered system of privilege that can dictate the genetic future of the pride. But the most dangerous form of diplomacy occurs at the intersection of the pride and the outside world. We often think of male coalitions as monolithic units, but they are frequently uneasy alliances. A coalition of 2 or 3 brothers may rule together, but the bond is often transactional. There is a phenomenon known as coalition instability, where the subtle shifts in dominance between the males can lead to sudden, catastrophic betrayals. A weaker male in a coalition may realize that by briefly aligning with an encroaching rival, he can secure his own position at the expense of his brothers. It is a calculated gamble. Trade the security of a brotherhood for the uncertain survival of a solo reign. Even more complex is the diplomacy of scent. Lions use scent marking, rubbing their cheeks against bushes or spraying urine, to communicate a sophisticated biological dossier to every inhabitant of the savanna. These scent marks are not just territorial boundaries, they are political manifestos. They convey the age, health, reproductive status, and even the genetic relatedness of the pride members. A well-placed scent mark can act as a deterrent, preventing a fight before it begins, or it can serve as a provocation, signaling a weakness that rivals will move to exploit. In this world, information is as lethal as a claw. A scent mark that suggests a king is aging or a female is entering estrus can trigger a chain reaction of movement, migration, and war. Betrayal in the lion kingdom isn't always a physical strike. Sometimes, it is the subtle abandonment of a social bond, the refusal to defend a brother in a skirmish, or the calculated scent marking that invites an enemy to the gates. In the pursuit of the crown, even the closest kin are merely temporary allies in a landscape where trust is a luxury that few can afford. But if politics is the invisible architecture of the pride, how does that structure translate into the brutal physical reality of a meal? To feed a kingdom, one must master more than just strength. One must master the geometry of the hunt. While the males serve as the heavy artillery, defending the borders and occasionally taking down the largest, most dangerous prey, the true tactical genius of the species lies with the lionesses. They are not merely hunters. They are the pride's specialized strike force, operating through a sophisticated system of coordinated maneuvers known as shadow tactics. A successful hunt is rarely a chaotic charge. Instead, it is a choreographed sequence of roles, often dictated by the subtle social hierarchy established in the pride's political life. When a pride stalks a herd of zebra or wildebeest, they do not move as a single mass. They divide. In a maneuver often referred to as encirclement, the lionesses split into specialized units. A group of wings will peel away from the main body, creeping through the tall, golden grass to flank the prey. Their goal is not to kill, but to drive. These flankers act as living walls, subtly nudging the herd away from the safety of open plains and toward a killing zone where the pride's heavy hitters lie in wait. This coordination is aided by a remarkable biological advantage. The lion's visual system is optimized for motion and low light contrast, but their tactical success relies on the silent approach. Unlike many felids that rely on pure explosive speed, lions utilize a method of incremental positioning. They use micro-adjustments in their posture to minimize their silhouette against the horizon, a behavior that requires an almost intuitive understanding of the wind direction and the sensory limits of their prey. But there is a darker, more calculated side to this coordination. In larger prides, researchers have observed a phenomenon of role specialization. Not every lioness is a sprinter. Some are drivers, larger females who use their sheer presence to panic the herd, while others are ambushers, smaller, more agile individuals who specialize in the high-speed interception. This division of labor is an evolutionary masterstroke, maximizing the caloric return on every hunt and minimizing the risk of injury. Yet the hunt is a high-stakes gamble of energy economics. A lioness can expend a massive amount of metabolic energy in a single pursuit, and if the strike fails, the cost is not just exhaustion, it is starvation. This leads to a phenomenon known as opportunistic tactical shifting. If a primary target proves too elusive or too dangerous, the pride will instantly recalibrate, pivoting from a coordinated ambush to a scavenger-style raid on a carcass left by a leopard or a hyena. In the shadow tactics of the lioness, we see the perfect marriage of social intelligence and predatory instinct. It is a dance of shadows and silence, where a single misstep in coordination can mean the difference between a feast that sustains a dynasty and a famine that breaks it. To hunt is to navigate a complex equation of physics, biology, and social trust, where the ability to read your sister's movement is just as vital as the ability to read the wind. But what happens when the very landscape that dictates these tactics begins to move? If the pride is a master of geometry, then the great migrations are the shifting canvas upon which that geometry is drawn. In the vast, rhythmic expanse of the African savanna, life is not a static state. It is a pulse. And for the lion, the pulse is dictated by the movement of millions of hooves. To understand the lion, one must understand the conveyor belt of protein that is the migration. Every year, driven by the ancient, chemical signals of rainfall and the desperate search for green grass, millions of wildebeest, zebras, and gazelles undergo a staggering circular journey. This is not merely a trek. It is a massive, seasonal redistribution of biomass. For the lion, these migrations represent the ultimate biological jackpot, a predictable, high-density surge of calories that can sustain a pride through the leanest months of the year. However, relying on the migration is a double-edged sword. It is a phenomenon of extreme abundance, but it is also a matter of precarious timing. The lions must synchronize their reproductive cycles and their territorial movements with this pulse. If a pride's cub-rearing season falls too far out of sync with the arrival of the herds, the metabolic cost of hunting smaller, more dispersed prey can lead to a catastrophic collapse in cub survival rates. As the herds move, the lions must undergo a tactical evolution of their own. During the height of the migration, the traditional shadow tactics and encirclement maneuvers often give way to a more aggressive, high-volume form of predation. When the density of prey reaches a certain threshold, the lions shift from being surgical strikers to being opportunistic interceptors. They become masters of the choke point. They identify the narrow river crossings or the dense thickets where the migrating herds are forced to slow down, turning these geographical bottlenecks into slaughterhouses. But there is a hidden complexity to this seasonal feast. The migration is not just a buffet, it is a battlefield of energy competition. As the herds arrive, they bring with them a secondary wave of predators. The lions find themselves in a frantic, high-stakes race against hyenas, cheetahs, and Nile crocodiles. This creates a phenomenon known as interference competition, where the presence of a rival predator can force a lion to abandon a successful kill, effectively wasting the massive caloric investment of the hunt. Furthermore, the migration creates a landscape of fear that reshapes lion behavior. To capitalize on the herds, prides often become more nomadic, abandoning the security of established territories to follow the moving biomass. This forced mobility comes at a heavy price: increased territorial conflict. As different prides converge on the same migratory corridors, the risk of lethal encounters between males and prides skyrockets. The Great Migration is, therefore, the ultimate test of the lion's evolutionary design. It is a period where the social cohesion of the pride, the tactical brilliance of the hunt, and the raw biological necessity of survival are pushed to their absolute limits. In this seasonal dance, the lion is no longer just a king of a static territory. They are a passenger on a moving tide of life, chasing a horizon that never stays still. But what happens when the conveyor belt of life grinds to a halt? When the rains fail, the rhythm of the savanna breaks. The the pulse of the migration falters, and the vibrant, moving canvas of the landscape turns into a scorched, static wasteland. This is the onset of the lean season, the era of the Hunger Games. For a pride, starvation is not a slow descent. It is a violent physiological siege. As the biomass of the plains diminishes, the lions enter a state of metabolic crisis. To survive, they must bridge the gap between their immense caloric requirements and a disappearing reality. A male lion, weighing nearly 200 kilograms, requires roughly 7 to 10 kilograms of meat every single day just to maintain his current mass. When the herds vanish, that math becomes a death sentence. In these desperate hours, the pride's social hierarchy begins to fracture under the weight of biological necessity. The matriarchal engine that drives the pride's hunting success starts to sputter. We often see the lionesses as the primary providers, but during extreme scarcity, a phenomenon known as nutritional triage occurs. The pride's internal politics shift toward survival at any cost. In many cases, the strongest hunters will prioritize their own caloric intake, or that of the dominant males, leaving the weakest, often the cubs or the elderly females, to face the slow attrition of emaciation. The hunt itself undergoes a desperate, radical transformation. The sophisticated, geometric encirclement tactics used during the migration are abandoned. There is no longer the luxury of patience or the ability to wait for the perfect ambush. Instead, the lions become desperation predators. They begin to target prey that was once considered too high risk or too low reward. They move from the efficient slaughter of zebra to the grueling, high-risk confrontation with megaherbivores like the Cape buffalo. This is a gamble of extreme proportions. A single kick from a buffalo can shatter a lion's jaw or puncture a lung, and in a state of starvation, a single injury is often a terminal diagnosis. Without the fat reserves to fuel a long recovery, an injured lion is a lion that will never hunt again. Furthermore, the scarcity of meat triggers a brutal escalation in interspecific warfare. As the landscape of fear intensifies, the competition for the few remaining carcasses becomes a zero-sum game. This is where the interference competition mentioned before reaches its most lethal peak. Hyenas, driven by the same primal desperation, no longer merely scavenge, they become aggressors. They will launch coordinated, multi-individual assaults on a pride to steal a kill, knowing that a starving lion is a lion with diminished defensive capacity. Even more harrowing is the biological toll on the pride's future. Under the stress of famine, female lions may experience reproductive suppression. Their bodies, sensing the lack of environmental stability, may cease ovulation or fail to support a pregnancy, a desperate evolutionary mechanism to prevent the birth of offspring that are doomed to starve. The Hunger Games are a period of profound regression. The majesty of the apex predator is stripped away, leaving behind only the raw, frantic mechanics of survival. The crown is heavy, but when the kingdom is empty, the crown becomes a burden that many cannot carry. In the silence of the drought, the only thing louder than the heat is the sound of a kingdom consuming itself. Can a mountain of muscle outrun a lightning bolt? In the desperate theater of the lean season, the lion's greatest evolutionary asset, its massive, heavy-set frame, suddenly becomes its greatest liability. To understand the struggle of the hunt, one must understand the brutal physics of the pursuit. A lion is a masterpiece of explosive power, but it is not a marathon runner. It is a sprinter built for the short, violent burst. When the pride pivots from the relatively easy task of stalking nimble gazelles to the high-stakes confrontation with megaherbivores, they are entering a realm governed by the laws of mass and momentum. A Cape buffalo can weigh upwards of 700 kilograms, a living fortress of horn and muscle. To bring such a creature down, the lion cannot rely on agility. It must rely on sheer, overwhelming force. This is the size aspect of the equation, the ability to use weight to pin, to wrestle, and to suffocate. But the buffalo is not a passive target. It is a creature of terrifying velocity. Despite its bulk, a buffalo can reach speeds of 50 kilometers per hour, and a zebra can accelerate with a lateral agility that makes the lion look clumsy by comparison. This creates a physiological paradox. The lion must be heavy enough to subdue a giant, yet light enough to catch a fleeing shadow. As the hunger deepens, the speed gap widens. In a healthy ecosystem, a lion has the luxury of caloric reserves to fuel a high-intensity chase. But a starving lion is an engine running on empty. Every sprint is a gamble with metabolic bankruptcy. Biologically, lions are anaerobic specialists. They rely on fast-twitch muscle fibers that burn through glycogen stores with terrifying efficiency. Once those stores are depleted, the lion hits a physiological wall, a state of lactic acid buildup that renders them sluggish and vulnerable. This is where the hunt becomes a tactical nightmare. To bridge the gap between their limited speed and the prey's rapid escape, lions must rely on energy-minimizing tactics. They cannot afford a long pursuit. Instead, they must utilize the terrain to negate the prey's speed. They use the microtopography of the savanna, a single dip in the earth, a cluster of dry brush, or the golden hue of the tall grass to get within the strike zone. The strike zone is the critical distance where the lion's explosive acceleration can overcome the prey's reaction time. If the lion misses this window, the hunt is over. The prey vanishes into the horizon, and the pride is left with nothing but the crushing weight of their own exhaustion. There is also a hidden neurological cost to this struggle. Recent studies in predator-prey dynamics suggest that extreme nutritional stress can impair a lion's reactive neurobiology, the ability to process visual stimuli and coordinate a strike in a split second. A starving lion isn't just slower, it is less precise. Its timing, the very foundation of its predatory success, begins to slip. In this collision of size and speed, the margin for error evaporates. The lion is trapped in a biological vice, too heavy to be truly fast and too hungry to afford being slow. It is a high-stakes game of physics where the prize is life, and the penalty for a single miscalculated step is the slow, hollow descent into extinction. But what happens when the kill is finally made and the prize is won? In the logic of the wild, a kill is not a victory. It is a target. The moment the blood hits the dust, the lion's hard-won triumph is broadcast across the savanna via an invisible chemical siren song. The scent of fresh hemoglobin and the visceral aroma of opened viscera travel on the wind, signaling to every opportunist within a 5-mile radius that a feast has begun. This is the onset of the scavenger conflict, a chaotic, multi-species war where the lion's status as an apex predator is put to the ultimate test. The most relentless of these challengers are the spotted hyenas. To the untrained eye, they are mere scavengers, but biologically, they are the lion's most sophisticated evolutionary rivals. They possess a specialized bone-crushing morphology, with premolars capable of exerting pressures that can shatter the femur of a buffalo. While a lion relies on the strength of its grip to hold a kill, a hyena relies on the sheer mechanical advantage of its jaw. The conflict is rarely a fair fight. It is a war of attrition. Hyenas do not attack a lion head-on. They employ a strategy of social harassment. They utilize their highly complex social hierarchies to coordinate mobbing behaviors. By surrounding a pride, they create a psychological pressure cooker, forcing the lions to expend precious calories defending a meal they have already worked so hard to secure. For a lion, every minute spent fighting off a clan of hyenas is a minute of metabolic theft, energy stolen from their own survival. Above this terrestrial battlefield, a darker, more silent threat circles. Vultures, While they lack the physical power to challenge a lion, their role in the conflict is one of information brokerage. Vultures are the savanna's most efficient aerial observers. Once they descend, they act as a visual beacon, drawing in even more scavengers and escalating the scale of the chaos. There is a subtle, often overlooked biological tension here: the kleptoparasitism cycle. This is the evolutionary arms race of stealing food. Lions are often forced into a defensive posture, but they are not without their own tactical responses. A pride will often attempt to zone a kill, using their larger body mass to create a physical perimeter. However, when a pride is weakened by the very nutritional stress we discussed previously, this perimeter collapses. The conflict reaches a fever pitch when the asymmetry of risk shifts. A lion, injured in a scrap with a hyena, faces a death sentence. A minor laceration can lead to sepsis. A broken tooth can mean the inability to hunt. For the lion, the scavenger conflict is not just about the loss of meat. It is about the risk of catastrophic injury. In this desperate scramble, the hierarchy of the savanna is rewritten. The lion may have provided the muscle to bring down the prey, but the scavengers are masters of the aftermath. It is a brutal, high-stakes economy of calories, where the king can be stripped of his crown before the sun even sets, leaving him to face the coming night with nothing but the echoes of a stolen feast. But what is the true price of this hard-won meal? For the lions, the aftermath of a successful hunt is rarely a moment of rest. It is a period of profound physiological and physical debt. To understand the cost of victory, one must look beyond the immediate violence and into the cellular reality of the predator. A single hunt for a megaherbivore, a buffalo or a zebra, is an explosive anaerobic event. It is a sprint that pushes the lion's cardiovascular system to its absolute threshold. Unlike the cheetah, which is built for short burst speed, or the wolf, built for long-distance endurance, the lion is a creature of massive, heavy muscle. This muscle is incredibly expensive to fuel. During a high-intensity chase, lions experience a massive buildup of lactic acid in their tissues, leading to a state of metabolic acidosis. This isn't just being tired. It is a systemic chemical imbalance that requires hours, sometimes days, of complete inactivity to resolve. In the wild, time spent recovering is time spent being vulnerable. Furthermore, the victory is often shadowed by the invisible specter of trauma. The mechanics of a kill are inherently dangerous. When a lioness brings down a Cape buffalo, she is wrestling with a half-ton of muscle and horn. It is common for hunters to sustain micro-traumas, small, jagged lacerations from horns or hooves, or blunt force bruising from a desperate kick. While these might seem minor, in the unforgiving heat of the savanna, they are biological liabilities. A single puncture wound from a buffalo horn can introduce anaerobic bacteria deep into the muscle tissue, leading to localized necrosis or systemic sepsis. In a world where a lion's primary tool for survival is its mouth, a single broken canine tooth, often lost in the struggle with a thrashing prey animal, is a catastrophic failure. A lion with a broken tooth cannot grip the throat of a kill. It cannot eat efficiently. It begins a slow, agonizing descent into starvation. There is also the hidden cost of nutritional instability. Because lions are social hunters, the distribution of meat within the pride is a high-stakes game of biological mathematics. While the dominant males often claim the lion's share of the protein, the lionesses, the true architects of the hunt, must balance the caloric intake required to support their own bodies with the massive energy demands of lactation. For a nursing lioness, the cost of victory is magnified. If she fails to secure enough calories to offset the energy spent on the hunt, her milk production drops, and the next generation of the dynasty begins to wither before it can even walk. Ultimately, the hunt is a gamble of diminishing returns. The lion spends a massive amount of energy to acquire a resource, only to face a secondary expenditure of energy defending that resource from scavengers, and a tertiary expenditure of energy repairing the physical damage sustained during the process. This is the brutal ledger of the apex predator. A constant, high-stakes calculation where the calories gained must always, desperately, outweigh the physical and chemical tolls paid to secure them. In the kingdom of the lion, every feast is bought with a piece of the hunter's own life. But what happens when the cost of the feast is not just measured in calories, but in blood? As the lionesses struggle to recover from the metabolic exhaustion of the kill, a different kind of shadow begins to move across the savanna. It is not the shadow of a larger predator, but a chorus of eerie, rising vocalizations that signal the arrival of the kingdom's most persistent rival. The hyena war has begun. This is not merely a struggle over a carcass. It is a multi-generational conflict for the very soul of the ecosystem. For decades, popular myth has cast the spotted hyena as a lowly scavenger, a mere opportunist waiting for the lion to finish its work. But modern ethology reveals a much more complex and terrifying reality. The spotted hyena, Crocuta crocuta, is not a scavenger by necessity, but a highly sophisticated, social apex predator in its own right. They are the only animals on the continent that can challenge a lion pride for dominance in a direct, tactical confrontation. The war is defined by a brutal asymmetry of power. A single lion holds a massive physiological advantage in sheer bone-crushing force and individual combat. However, the hyena operates on the principle of collective intelligence. Hyena clans are structured with a strict matriarchal hierarchy, where the social cohesion of the group allows them to execute complex, coordinated maneuvers that can overwhelm even the most formidable pride. While a lion relies on the explosive, anaerobic power we have just discussed, the hyena is a masterpiece of aerobic efficiency. Their specialized digestive systems, capable of processing bone and keratin through highly acidic gastric juices, allow them to extract every possible joule of energy from a kill, meaning they can survive on much less than a lion. In the heat of the skirmish, the battlefield becomes a chaotic theater of psychological warfare. Hyenas utilize mobbing tactics, circling the pride and using their distinctive, high-pitched vocalizations to create a sensory overload. This isn't just noise. It is a calculated attempt to induce stress and cognitive distraction in the lions. During these encounters, the lions face a harrowing biological dilemma. Do they expend their dwindling ATP reserves, the cellular energy required for muscle contraction, to defend the kill, or do they abandon the meal to conserve strength for the next hunt? Every time a lioness chooses to fight, she risks more than just a wound. She risks a catastrophic depletion of her metabolic reserves. If the fight drags on, the buildup of lactic acid intensifies, pushing her closer to the brink of physical collapse. Meanwhile, the hyenas are playing a game of attrition. They are not looking for a decisive victory. They are looking to chip away at the lion's dominance, one stolen kilo of meat at a time. This is a war of attrition where the stakes are nothing less than the survival of the lineage. When hyenas successfully drive lions away from a kill, they aren't just stealing food. They are inducing a state of nutritional instability that can ripple through the pride, affecting everything from the strength of the males to the survival rate of the cubs. In the eternal struggle between the golden king and the spotted shadow, there is no peace, only a constant, grinding competition for the right to exist. But while the hyenas wage a loud, chaotic war of attrition in the open, a far more insidious threat moves through the periphery of the pride's awareness. It is a ghost in the tall grass, a predator that does not seek to challenge the lion's throne through brute force, but through the mastery of evasion and the theft of opportunity. If the hyena is the lion's rival in battle, the leopard, Panthera pardus, is its rival in subtlety. The relationship between these two apex predators is defined by a profound biological asymmetry. The lion is a creature of the sun and the plains, a heavyset powerhouse built for the frontal assault. The leopard, however, is a creature of the liminal spaces, the edges of the forest, the shadows of the acacia, and the vertical world of the canopy. While the lion dominates the landscape through presence, the leopard dominates through absence. This is a competition of niche partitioning. To survive in a landscape shared with the king, the leopard has evolved into the ultimate specialist of the small and frequent. While a lion pride focuses its massive metabolic requirements on high-yield, high-risk megafauna, the leopard operates on a different caloric economy. They target the medium-sized ungulates, the primates, and the smaller carnivores that fall beneath the lion's tactical radar. Yet, this specialization comes with a hidden cost. The leopard is a perpetual fugitive. Because a single lioness can easily kill a leopard to eliminate competition, the leopard has developed an extraordinary physiological adaptation for survival: extreme muscular hypertrophy in the forelimbs. This allows them to perform feats of verticality that defy the standard physics of a large felid, enabling them to haul carcasses twice their own body weight into the safety of the trees. This isn't just a display of strength. It is a sophisticated defensive mechanism against kleptoparasitism, the theft of food. But the leopard's true impact on the lion's kingdom is felt in the quiet depletion of the ecosystem's middle tier. Through a process of subtle competitive exclusion, leopards can effectively thin out the available prey density in a territory. As leopards efficiently harvest the medium-sized prey, they leave the lion pride with a narrowing menu of options. For a pride already struggling with the metabolic exhaustion of the hyena wars, the disappearance of these mid-sized caloric buffers can be the difference between stability and starvation. Furthermore, there is a silent, psychological tax paid by the lion. The presence of leopards creates a fragmented landscape. Lions are forced to patrol wider territories to compensate for the prey lost to the shadows, increasing their energy expenditure and exposing them to more frequent territorial disputes with other prides. In the complex web of the savanna, the leopard is the master of the silent theft. They do not roar, they do not mob, and they do not challenge the king to a duel. They simply exist in the blind spots of the pride, carving out a kingdom within a kingdom. They are the architects of a quiet scarcity, proving that in the struggle for dominance, the most dangerous enemy isn't always the one who meets you head-on, but the one you never see coming. But what happens when the shadow retreats and the threat finally steps into the light? If the leopard is the master of the silent theft, then the true existential crisis of the lion occurs when the enemy is not a different species, but one of their own. This is the realm of intraspecific warfare, a brutal, high-stakes conflict where the battlefield is the very territory the pride calls home. In the biological theater of the savanna, there is no greater threat to a lion's stability than the collision of two competing dynasties. When two prides overlap, it is not merely a skirmish. It is a total war for ecological real estate. Unlike the opportunistic scavenging of a hyena, pride warfare is driven by the pursuit of territorial exclusivity. For a lion, land is not just space, it is a finite bank of calories. To lose a territory is to lose the right to hunt, to breed, and to exist. These encounters often begin with a psychological siege. Long before teeth meet flesh, the air is saturated with the sonic weaponry of the pride, the territorial roar. A lion's roar can reach 114 decibels, a frequency designed to carry for miles, serving as a biological keep-out sign. This is an evolutionary gamble. By broadcasting their presence, a pride attempts to settle disputes through acoustic intimidation, hoping to avoid the metabolic cost of a physical fight. Because a single wound in the wild can be a death sentence via infection or starvation, the roar is the first line of defense in a complex system of preemptive diplomacy. However, when diplomacy fails, the violence is catastrophic. In these clashes, we see the terrifying reality of coalition dynamics. A single male lion, no matter how magnificent, is almost always outmatched by a coalition of brothers. Evolution has favored these fraternal alliances. By fighting as a unit, brothers can increase their collective combat efficacy, allowing them to displace even the most seasoned resident kings. This is the paradox of lion strength. The very sociality that makes the pride successful is the same mechanism that drives its internal destruction. During these wars, the stakes extend far beyond the males. The most harrowing aspect of intraspecific conflict is the biological reset known as infanticide. When a new coalition successfully usurps a territory, they do not merely take the land. They systematically eliminate the previous generation's lineage. By killing the existing cubs, the new kings force the resident lionesses back into estrus, ensuring that the pride's future energy is invested entirely in the new regime's genetic offspring. It is a cold, calculated biological strategy to accelerate the turnover of dominance. This constant state of upheaval creates a demographic instability that ripples through the entire ecosystem. Frequent pride turnovers mean that the resident males are often young, inexperienced, and prone to making tactical errors in hunting, which can lead to a localized collapse in prey management. In the grand architecture of the savanna, intraspecific warfare acts as a violent regulator. It prevents any single dynasty from becoming too entrenched, ensuring a constant, albeit bloody, churn of genetic material. But for the individual lion, caught in the crossfire of a territorial takeover, it is a relentless cycle of loss. In the kingdom of the lion, the crown is not merely earned. It is held through a continuous, exhausting campaign against the very blood that flows through one's own veins. But what if the war is not won and the crown is lost? Beyond the borders of established kingdoms, in the scorched and unforgiving margins of the savanna, lies a different kind of existence. This is the realm of the nomad. If the pride is a fortress of social security, the nomad is a ghost, a biological outcast drifting through a landscape that offers no sanctuary. To understand the nomad, one must first understand the sheer weight of their exile. Most male lions enter the wild as part of a coalition, but when those alliances are broken, either by death or by the violent displacement of a superior rival, the survivors are cast out. They become the wanderers, the transient males, stripped of the protection of a pride and the luxury of a predictable kill. For a nomad, life is a desperate calculation of metabolic debt. In a pride, hunting is a communal, energy-efficient endeavor. For the lone male, however, the math changes. Without a coalition to help corner a Cape buffalo or a zebra, the nomad is forced to rely on smaller, more elusive prey or to engage in high-risk scavenging. This leads to a phenomenon known as nutritional stress. A nomad's body is often a map of its failures. Ribs visible beneath a thinning mane and scars that never quite heal because the body lacks the protein reserves to repair itself. The nomad's struggle is not merely a battle against hunger, it is a battle against invisibility. Without a territory to defend, a nomad lacks the social status required to attract females. They are caught in a biological stalemate. They wander the corridors between prides, searching for an opening, a weakness, or a chance encounter. Yet, their very presence is a liability. A lone male is often viewed by resident prides as a threat to be neutralized rather than a potential mate. This creates a predatory paradox. The lion, the ultimate predator, becomes the hunted, forced to avoid the very prides that should be its biological destination. There is a hidden, darker layer to this struggle, the genetic cost of exile. While nomads are the primary drivers of gene flow, carrying DNA from one isolated population to another, their survival rate is staggeringly low. Scientific observations suggest that a significant portion of nomadism is driven by dispersal necessity. As young males reach sexual maturity, the hormonal surge of testosterone drives them to leave their natal pride to avoid inbreeding. They are biologically programmed to seek new kingdoms, yet they are often sent into a wasteland where the probability of success is slim. As they drift, nomads often encounter the edge effects of the ecosystem. They are the first to feel the impact of fragmented habitats. A nomad needs vast, unbroken stretches of land to find enough food to sustain their massive caloric requirements. But as the savanna shrinks, the nomad finds themselves trapped in ecological dead zones. Areas too small to support a pride, but too dangerous to traverse. In this lonely state, the nomad represents the rawest form of the lion's existence. They are the embodiment of the species' vulnerability. They possess all the weaponry of a king, the teeth, the claws, the roar, but none of the power. They are the living embodiment of the struggle to persist when the social contract of the pride is torn away. In the nomad's eyes, we see the true cost of the savanna's hierarchy. To be a lion is to fight for a kingdom, but to be a nomad is to fight simply for the right to see tomorrow's sun. But what if the very ground beneath their paws becomes the enemy? If the nomad's struggle is a battle against social invisibility, the struggle of the pride is increasingly a battle against a changing atmosphere. We often think of the lion as a master of its domain, an entity that dictates the terms of survival through sheer force of will. But there is a silent, invisible architect that holds more power than any king: the climate. The African savanna is defined by its pulse, the rhythmic oscillation between the deluge of the rains and the searing heat of the dry season. For millennia, this cycle has been predictable, a biological clock that lions have evolved to follow with surgical precision. They know when to conserve energy, when to hunt the migrating herds, and when to retreat into the shade. But that clock is breaking. We are entering an era of climatic volatility, where the traditional seasons are being replaced by extremes that defy evolutionary logic. It is no longer just about the dry season, it is about the intensity of the drought. When prolonged droughts strike, they trigger a catastrophic domino effect known as bottom-up trophic collapse. It begins with the vegetation. As the grasses wither and the water holes vanish, the primary consumers, the grazers like wildebeest and zebra, begin to die in staggering numbers. For the lion, this creates a deceptive period of abundance. A drought can actually lead to a temporary spike in hunting success as prey becomes weakened and concentrated around dwindling water sources. But this is a biological trap. It is a feast before the famine. The lions are consuming a dwindling resource that cannot replenish itself. This leads to a phenomenon called predator-prey decoupling, where the lion population remains high even as the prey base collapses, setting the stage for a sudden, violent crash in lion numbers. Then there is the matter of heat. A lion is a massive thermoregulatory nightmare. Their thick manes, while a symbol of status and a tool for sexual selection, act as heat sinks, trapping warmth against the body. As ambient temperatures rise due to shifting climatic patterns, lions are forced into behavioral thermoregulation, spending more hours in the shade to avoid hyperthermia. But every hour spent resting is an hour not spent hunting. This creates a metabolic deficit. They are literally too hot to eat and too hungry to hunt. Furthermore, we are witnessing the expansion of aridification, the permanent transformation of semi-arid lands into true deserts. As these landscapes shift, the carrying capacity of the land, the maximum number of lions a territory can support, is plummeting. In these shrinking zones, competition turns from a struggle for dominance into a desperate fight for existence. Even the water itself has become a weapon of instability. Unpredictable, torrential, flash floods are becoming more common, disrupting the migratory corridors that lions rely on to find food. These floods can drown prey, destroy dens, and scatter prides, breaking the very social structures that ensure their survival. In the old world, a lion could count on the seasons to reset the stage. But in this new, volatile reality, the stage itself is dissolving. The kingdom is not just being contested by rivals or lost to humans, it is being rewritten by a climate that no longer recognizes the rules of the hunt. The throne is not just being challenged, it is being evaporated. How much weight can a kingdom carry before the foundation itself fractures? We have discussed the external violence of the hyena and the internal wars of the pride, but there exists a more subtle mathematical tension that governs the survival of every apex predator: the predator-prey ratio. In a healthy ecosystem, this is a delicate, rhythmic dance of numbers. But in the modern African savanna, that dance is turning into a death spiral. To understand the fragility of the lion's throne, one must look past the teeth and the claws and into the cold calculus of bioenergetics. A lion is an energy specialist. They are built for explosive, high-octane power, but they are biologically incapable of sustained endurance. Every kill is a high-stakes gamble of caloric expenditure. If a lion spends 10,000 calories to hunt a zebra, but only gains 8,000 from the meat, they are effectively starving while eating. This is the energetic deficit, a silent killer that accumulates in the blood of a pride long before a single lion actually dies of hunger. This deficit is being exacerbated by a phenomenon known as prey patchiness. In a stable era, herbivores were distributed across the landscape in predictable waves. Today, due to habitat fragmentation and shifting rainfall, prey populations are becoming increasingly clumped and unpredictable. For a lion, this means the search cost, the energy spent roaming vast, empty distances to find a single herd, is skyrocketing. When the search cost exceeds the caloric reward of the kill, the pride enters a state of physiological decline. As these energetic margins thin, we see a terrifying shift in the trophic cascade. In a balanced system, lions act as regulators, preventing herbivores from overgrazing the land. But when the lion population begins to dip due to these energetic stresses, the regulatory pressure vanishes. This allows herbivore populations to surge temporarily, leading to massive overgrazing. This, in turn, destroys the soil structure and the very grasses that sustain the entire food web. It is a feedback loop of degradation. The lions lose their food, the herbivores destroy the land, and the land loses its ability to support life. Even more insidious is the stoichiometric imbalance occurring in the changing landscape. As droughts become more frequent and intense, the nutritional quality of the vegetation changes. Plants under water stress often accumulate higher concentrations of secondary metabolites, natural toxins, to protect themselves. This means the herbivores eating these plants are becoming less nutritious. They are empty calories. A lion may successfully bring down a buffalo, but if that buffalo has been grazing on nutrient-poor, stressed vegetation, the lion is essentially consuming a meal that lacks the essential minerals and proteins required for muscle maintenance and successful cub rearing. We are witnessing the unraveling of a biological contract that has been written over millions of years. The predator-prey relationship was never meant to be a static state. It was meant to be a fluid, resilient oscillation. But as the mathematical margins of survival narrow, the oscillation is becoming a collapse. The lions are finding themselves caught in a tightening vice where the math simply no longer adds up. They are masters of a game where the rules are being rewritten by a landscape that can no longer afford to feed them. What happens to a king when the borders of his empire begin to vanish, not through conquest, but through disappearance? For millennia, the lion's kingdom was defined by the reach of its roar, a vast, contiguous expanse of savanna and scrub where a pride could roam, hunt, and retreat without ever encountering a barrier they could not overcome. But the horizon is no longer an infinite line. It is becoming a cage. We are entering the era of the shrinking horizon, where the greatest threat to the apex predator is not the rival pride or the scavenging hyena, but the invisible geometry of human encroachment. This is the tragedy of habitat fragmentation. To the human eye, a new fence line, a paved road, or a sprawling agricultural settlement may look like a minor intrusion. But to a lion, these are biological dead zones. When a landscape is carved into isolated islands of wilderness, we trigger a phenomenon known as edge effects. As the core area of a habitat shrinks, the proportion of its perimeter increases. For a wide-ranging carnivore, the edge is a zone of extreme danger, a place where the probability of encountering humans, domestic livestock, and vehicles increases exponentially. The lion is a creature of connectivity. Their survival depends on biological corridors, ancestral pathways that allow subadult males to disperse and find new territories, and for prides to migrate in response to shifting prey densities. When these corridors are severed by human infrastructure, the kingdom is fractured into genetic silos. We are seeing the emergence of island populations. In these isolated pockets, the math of survival turns grim. Without the ability to move, the lions are trapped in a landscape that may be too small to support their energetic needs, regardless of how much prey is present. This isolation leads to a silent genetic erosion, the founder effect, and subsequent inbreeding depression. When a population is cut off, the gene pool stagnates. In small, fragmented populations, deleterious alleles, harmful genetic mutations, begin to accumulate. We are observing subtle but devastating physiological declines, reduced sperm quality in males, increased cub mortality, and compromised immune systems. The lions are not just losing their land. They are losing the very biological blueprints that made them the masters of the savanna. Furthermore, fragmentation creates a lethal ecological trap. As lions are pushed into smaller, more marginal territories, they are forced into closer proximity to human settlements. This leads to the spillover effect, where lions, driven by the hunger we discussed earlier, begin to target domestic livestock. This is not a choice, but a biological necessity born of a broken landscape. The result is a cycle of retaliatory killing, a brutal, man-made pressure that removes the strongest individuals from the population, further weakening the pride's ability to defend its shrinking domain. The horizon is no longer a promise of more, it is a boundary of less. The vast, interconnected tapestry of the African wild is being shredded into a mosaic of disconnected fragments. As these islands of habitat shrink, the lions are being compressed into a corner of history, fighting a war against a geometry they cannot understand and a boundary they cannot cross. The kingdom is not being conquered, it is being erased, 1 hectare at a time. But what happens when the enemy does not roar, does not hunt, and does not even leave a footprint in the dust? If habitat fragmentation is the slow erosion of the lion's world, then human-wildlife conflict is the sudden, violent strike that follows. This is the silent killer. It is a conflict born not of malice, but of a fundamental, tragic collision between two different ways of occupying the earth. As the fences move in and the biological corridors vanish, the lion is pushed out of the shadows of the bush and into the bright, dangerous light of the human homestead. To a lion, a herd of cattle is not property. It is a concentrated, slow-moving packet of calories, an easy alternative to the increasingly scarce zebra or buffalo. When a pride is squeezed into a marginal territory, the biological imperative to feed overrides the instinct to avoid humans. They cross the invisible line. They enter the kraal. And in that single moment of survival, the lion transitions from a king to a pest. The retaliation is swift and often devastating. While we often focus on the visible tragedy of the gunshot, there is a more insidious method of elimination that is currently decimating lion populations across the continent: systemic poisoning. In many pastoralist communities, the loss of a single cow can represent a family's entire livelihood. To protect their wealth, herders often employ poisoned baits, carcasses laced with pesticides, or even highly toxic organophosphates. This is a particularly cruel form of warfare. Unlike a bullet, which may take a single individual, a poisoned carcass can trigger a cascade effect within a pride. Because lions are highly social and often feed communally, a single lethal meal can wipe out an entire matrilineal line in a single night. We are seeing the sudden, unexplained disappearance of entire prides, not because they lost a war to hyenas, but because they shared a meal that was designed to kill them. Furthermore, we must look at the invisible chemical toll. The encroachment of agriculture brings with it the heavy use of pesticides and fertilizers. These chemicals do not stay in the soil. They enter the food chain through a process called biomagnification. As a lion consumes prey that has grazed on chemically treated land, the concentration of toxins increases within the predator's own tissues. This sublethal poisoning can lead to neurological impairments, disrupting the very hunting instincts and sensory perceptions that Chapter 1 identified as the pinnacle of evolutionary mastery. A lion that cannot track a scent or react with lightning speed is a lion that cannot survive. The silent killer is not just a single event, it is a multi-front assault. It is the bullet in the night, the poison in the meat, and the slow accumulation of toxins in the blood. It is a conflict where the lion is fighting a ghost, an adversary that operates on a scale of logistics, economy, and chemistry that the predator cannot perceive. The tragedy is that this is a war of misunderstanding. The lion is following the ancient laws of hunger, while the human is following the modern laws of property. In this collision, there is no middle ground, only a widening gap where the kings of the savannah are being systematically erased by the very shadow of human progress. But what if the threat isn't a misunderstanding of boundaries, but a calculated, cold-blooded exploitation of the lion's very existence? If the silent killer is a war of survival, then poaching is a war of profit. It is a different kind of predator entirely, one that does not hunt for hunger, but for the insatiable appetite of the global black market. Here, the lion is no longer a king, nor even a pest. It is reduced to a commodity, a biological asset to be harvested and shipped across oceans. To understand the scale of this assault, we must look beyond the common image of the trophy hunter. While the pursuit of a skull or a skin makes for sensational headlines, the most devastating driver of lion decline is far more clinical and far more lucrative. We are witnessing a massive, organized trade in lion parts, bones, teeth, and claws, driven by a demand in the illegal wildlife trade that mirrors the dark economics of ivory or rhino horn. In certain regions of Asia, there is a growing, illicit belief in the medicinal properties of lion bones. These traditional remedies, often unsupported by any scientific reality, claim that lion bone can cure everything from impotence to chronic pain. This demand fuels a sophisticated supply chain that stretches from the remote bushveld to the bustling urban markets of the East. It is a shadow economy where a single lion can be worth tens of thousands of dollars on the black market, turning the act of killing into a high-stakes investment. But the tragedy of poaching is not just in the loss of life, it is in the selective nature of the slaughter. Poachers are rarely random. They are often hunting for specific biological traits. This has led to a phenomenon known as selective removal, where the most formidable males, those with the thickest, most impressive manes, are targeted first. In the biological world, the mane is more than just an ornament. It is a signal of genetic fitness, testosterone levels, and overall health. By removing the strongest, most dominant males, poachers are inadvertently performing a form of reverse evolution. They are stripping the species of its best genetic material, leaving behind a population of weaker, less resilient individuals. This creates a genetic vacuum that destabilizes the entire social structure of the pride, leaving females and cubs vulnerable to takeover by less experienced, more erratic males. Furthermore, the methods used are increasingly indiscriminate. The use of wire snares, crude, indiscriminate loops of metal, is a silent plague across the savanna. A snare set for a small antelope does not care if it catches a cub or a matriarch. These devices cause slow, agonizing deaths through infection or starvation, leaving wounds that never heal and breaking the social bonds that hold a pride together. When a lion is taken by a snare or a bullet, the impact is felt far beyond the individual. It creates a ripple effect through the ecosystem. The loss of a top predator disrupts the landscape of fear, the psychological pressure that predators exert on herbivores to keep them moving. Without the threat of the lion, prey populations can explode, leading to overgrazing and the eventual degradation of the very habitat the lion needs to survive. The black market is a parasite that feeds on the majesty of the wild, turning the biological perfection of the lion into a currency of blood. It is a war being fought with logistics and greed, a darkness that operates in the gaps of international law, threatening to turn the roar of the king into a memory. But what if the true devastation isn't always found in a single, violent act, but in the very ground they walk upon? If poaching is a direct assault, then the poisoning of the landscape is a slow-motion catastrophe, a chemical siege that turns the lion's sanctuary into a death trap. To the untrained eye, the savanna appears as it always has, golden, vast, and seemingly eternal. But beneath the surface, a silent molecular warfare is unfolding. The tragedy begins not with the lion, but with the livestock they are often blamed for competing with. As human settlements expand, farmers increasingly turn to heavy pesticides and organophosphates to protect their crops and herds. These chemicals are designed to kill insects or parasites, but in the complex web of the African ecosystem, they do not stay contained. They leach into the soil, seep into the water tables, and accumulate in the tissues of the smallest organisms. This is the phenomenon of biomagnification. A single insect consumes a trace amount of toxin, a bird eats 1,000 insects, a scavenger eats the bird, and eventually, the lion, the apex of this biological pyramid, consumes the accumulated toxicity of an entire food chain. By the time the poison reaches the lion, it is no longer a trace amount. It is a concentrated, lethal dose. However, the most insidious form of poisoning is not accidental. It is a calculated tool of retaliation. In many regions, poisoned carcasses are used as a weapon of war in the conflict between humans and wildlife. A farmer, having lost a calf to a pride, may leave a carcass laced with high doses of carbamate or even cyanide. To a lion, a fallen zebra is a windfall, a moment of much-needed caloric relief. But that meal becomes a Trojan horse. The physiological impact of these toxins is devastating. Unlike a bullet, which is instantaneous, poisoning is a lingering, systemic collapse. Organophosphates attack the nervous system, inhibiting the enzyme acetylcholinesterase, which leads to a complete breakdown of muscle control, respiratory failure, and agonizing seizures. A lion may survive the initial ingestion, only to wander aimlessly, unable to hunt or defend its territory, eventually succumbing to the slow erosion of its own biology. Even more haunting is the impact of secondary poisoning on the pride's social fabric. When a matriarch or a dominant male is poisoned, the pride does not just lose a member. It loses its institutional memory. The loss of a seasoned hunter or a protective leader creates a vacuum of knowledge and security. The cubs, deprived of the specialized care and protection only an experienced adult can provide, face a plummeting survival rate. Furthermore, we are seeing the emergence of sublethal effects. Not every poisoned lion dies immediately. Some carry the chemical burden in their systems, which can lead to reproductive failure, neurological impairment, and weakened immune responses. We are witnessing a generation of lions that are biologically hollowed out, physically present, yet chemically compromised, unable to perform the very instincts that made them masters of the wild. The landscape is being rewritten by invisible hands. The very elements that once sustained life, the water, the soil, the prey, have been weaponized. The kings are not just being hunted, they are being dissolved from the inside out, as the golden kingdom they rule is transformed into a toxic wasteland. But what if the poison isn't just in the soil or the water, but written into the very blueprint of their existence? If the chemical siege of the landscape is a slow erosion of the body, then what follows is an even more profound catastrophe: the erosion of the soul of the species. To understand the collapse of the lion's kingdom, we must look past the physical scars of the hunt and peer into the microscopic architecture of their DNA. We are witnessing the onset of a genetic bottleneck, a biological trap from which there may be no escape. In the golden age of the savanna, lion prides were part of a vast, interconnected tapestry. Genetic material flowed like the Great Migrations, moving through corridors of wilderness that allowed distant populations to meet, mate, and exchange the vital instructions for survival. This gene flow acted as a biological insurance policy, ensuring a diverse reservoir of traits that could adapt to changing climates, new diseases, or shifting prey populations. But the modern world has shattered those corridors. Human infrastructure, fences, highways, and sprawling settlements has carved the once continuous kingdom into isolated islands of habitat. For a lion, these islands are prisons. When a pride is cut off from its neighbors, the pool of available mates shrinks. When there are no new travelers arriving from distant lands, the pride is forced into a desperate, inevitable cycle. They must mate with those closest to them. This is the beginning of inbreeding depression, a silent, generational decay. As the genetic pool stagnates, the harmful mutations, tiny errors in the genetic code that are usually masked by healthy, diverse genes, begin to surface with terrifying frequency. In a healthy population, a recessive trait for a weakened immune system or a physical deformity is often hidden. But in a bottlenecked population, these flaws collide. They pair up, becoming the new standard. The consequences are not always immediate, which makes them so much more treacherous. We see it in the subtle decline of cub survival rates. We see it in the emergence of congenital defects, skeletal abnormalities, or compromised sensory organs that prevent a young male from ever becoming a king. Most devastatingly, we see it in the collapse of the MHC, the major histocompatibility complex. This is the specific suite of genes that governs the lion's immune response. When genetic diversity in the MHC collapses, the entire population becomes a biological monoculture. They may all look like kings, but they share the same Achilles heel. A single virus, a single new pathogen that once would have only affected a few individuals, can now sweep through an entire isolated population like wildfire, finding no genetic resistance to stop it. We are seeing this play out in real time in fragmented pockets of Africa. In some isolated subpopulations, we are observing genetic load, the accumulation of these deleterious mutations that act like a heavy weight, pulling the species toward an extinction vortex. The lions are becoming more uniform, more fragile, and less capable of the evolutionary pivot required to survive a changing world. The tragedy is no longer just about the lions we lose to the bullet or the poison. It is about the lions we lose to the math of survival. The kingdom is not just shrinking in size, it is shrinking in complexity. The kings are losing their ability to evolve, leaving them trapped in a biological countdown, where every generation is a slightly more hollowed-out version of the one that came before. But what happens when the very foundation of the kingdom, the energy that fuels the throne, begins to evaporate? To understand the lion, one must understand the caloric mathematics of the savanna. A pride of lions is not merely a social unit. It is a biological furnace, requiring an immense and constant influx of high-density protein to maintain the muscle, the heat, and the sheer metabolic cost of dominance. For millennia, this furnace was fueled by the great herds, the vast, pulsing rivers of wildebeest, zebra, and buffalo that moved in synchronicity with the rains. But today, the rivers are running dry. The collapse of the lion's kingdom is often framed through the lens of direct conflict, yet the most profound threat is one of subtraction. We call it prey depletion, but that term is too clinical for the reality of the situation. It is a systematic stripping of the land. As human settlements expand, the primary herbivores, the engine of the ecosystem, are being redirected. They are being fenced into agricultural lands, hunted for bushmeat, or lost to the fragmentation of their own migratory routes. When the biomass of the savanna drops, it doesn't just mean the lions hunt less often, it fundamentally alters their biological strategy. In a healthy ecosystem, lions are specialists of opportunity, capable of taking down massive megaherbivores like Cape buffalo. But as the density of these large ungulates collapses, lions are forced into a state of nutritional desperation. They are pushed towards smaller, more elusive, or less calorie-dense prey. This creates a devastating metabolic deficit. A lioness may successfully hunt a smaller impala, but the energy expended in the stalk, the chase, and the kill may actually exceed the caloric reward of the meat itself. This is the predator's trap, a state of negative energy balance where the more they hunt, the more they starve. Furthermore, we are witnessing a shift in the very composition of the food web. As large-bodied herbivores vanish, they are often replaced by smaller, more resilient species that are less efficient at sustaining large apex predators. This creates a trophic mismatch. The lions are evolutionarily calibrated to hunt the giants, yet the landscape is increasingly populated by the small. This scarcity triggers a cascade of secondary failures. When prey is low, pride territories must expand to cover more ground. Larger territories mean more frequent, violent encounters with rival prides and higher exposure to human-dominated landscapes. This leads to the starvation conflict cycle. A hungry lion is a lion that ventures toward a cattle crawl. A lion that ventures toward cattle is a lion that meets a retaliatory bullet. We are also seeing the impact of cryptic prey loss. This refers to the disappearance of the species that keep the ecosystem stable, even if they aren't the lion's primary target. When smaller grazers vanish due to habitat loss, the vegetation changes, the soil chemistry shifts, and the entire cycle of nutrient cycling, which ultimately supports the large herds the lions rely on, begins to fail. The kings are not just losing their subjects, they are losing their fuel. The throne is sitting atop an empty banquet hall, and as the calories vanish from the land, the shadow of the lion grows longer, thinner, and increasingly desperate. The kingdom is not just being conquered, it is being emptied. If the kingdom is being emptied, where does a king turn when there is nowhere left to rule? As the vast, interconnected tapestries of the African savanna are shredded into isolated fragments, the lion's world is no longer a continuous ocean of grass, but a series of shrinking islands. We are witnessing the era of the refugia, the last strongholds. These are the final, fortified bastions of the species, pockets of wilderness where the biological furnace can still find enough fuel to stay lit. But even these sanctuaries are far from the Edenic myth we often imagine. In the modern age, these strongholds are defined by their borders. They are primarily found in massive, protected landscapes like the Serengeti Mara ecosystem in East Africa, the Okavango Delta in Botswana, and the Kruger National Park in South Africa. In these specific geographies, the caloric mathematics we discussed earlier still hold a semblance of balance. Here, the migratory rivers of wildebeest and zebra still flow, and the density of megaherbivores remains high enough to support the metabolic demands of a pride. However, there is a hidden, darker side to these strongholds, the phenomenon of ecological entrapment. Because these areas are often surrounded by human-dominated landscapes, farms, roads, and villages, they act as biological islands. While the lions inside are protected by law, they are effectively trapped. This isolation creates a profound genetic crisis. In a healthy, sprawling kingdom, young males would disperse across hundreds of miles, carrying fresh genetic material to distant prides. But in a fragmented world, dispersal becomes a death sentence. A young lion attempting to leave a stronghold often finds himself in a no-man's land of fences and livestock, leading to what biologists call sink habitats, areas that look like they could support life, but actually function as traps that drain the population. This leads us to the terrifying reality of the genetic bottleneck. When a population is confined to a stronghold, the gene pool begins to stagnate. We are seeing increasing evidence of inbreeding depression in isolated populations, which manifests in reduced cub survival rates, skeletal deformities, and a compromised immune system. A king may sit on a throne of plenty, but if his lineage is thinning, his dynasty is already dead. Furthermore, these strongholds are increasingly becoming fortress conservation zones. They are islands of stability in a sea of chaos, but they are not self-sustaining. They require constant, intensive human intervention to remain viable. We are seeing a shift from natural selection to managed selection. In these final bastions, the lion's survival is no longer dictated solely by the strength of its claws or the cunning of its hunt, but by the reach of a ranger's patrol and the integrity of a boundary fence. The wildness is being curated. We are moving from an era of apex predators ruling by instinct to an era of zoofied wilderness, where the kings are kept on life support within the confines of a map. The strongholds are holding, for now. They are the last flickering embers of a once roaring fire. But as the islands get smaller and the genetic shadows grow longer, we must ask, is a kingdom held together by fences still a kingdom, or is it merely a beautiful, gilded cage? Can a species be saved by the very technology that once threatened to erase it? As we stand on the precipice of a silent extinction, the battle for the lion has moved from the dust of the savanna to the sterile precision of the laboratory. We are no longer merely observers of the wild, we have become its architects. This is the new frontier, the science of survival. To save a king, we must first understand the invisible blueprint that makes him. Modern conservation has moved far beyond the era of simple patrols and fences. Today, the survival of the pride is written in the language of genomics. Scientists are now utilizing advanced DNA profiling, extracting genetic material from hair follicles and even fecal samples left on the trail to map the genetic health of entire ecosystems. By sequencing the genomes of isolated populations, researchers can identify the exact moment inbreeding begins to erode a lineage. We are no longer guessing why a pride is failing. We are seeing the molecular signatures of decay. This data allows for one of the most controversial and high-stakes interventions in modern biology, genetic rescue. When a population in a stronghold becomes a genetic dead end, conservationists may perform a translocation, the deliberate movement of individuals between isolated islands of habitat. It is a biological transplant. By introducing a male from a distant, genetically diverse population into a stagnant pride, we are manually reintroducing the flow that human fences have severed. It is a desperate attempt to mimic the ancient, natural migrations that once governed the continent. But the science goes deeper than the bloodline. To predict where the next stronghold might emerge, we now employ predictive bioclimatic modeling. Using satellite telemetry and AI-driven algorithms, we can simulate how shifting rainfall patterns and rising temperatures will reshape the landscape decades before the first drought hits. We are creating digital twins of the savanna, testing scenarios to see which corridors of land will remain viable for the next century. We are searching for the climate refugia, the specific microclimates that will act as the ultimate lifeboats in a warming world. Even the way we track the kings has undergone a revolution. The days of the lone researcher following paw prints are being replaced by the invisible web of the Internet of Things. GPS satellite collars now transmit real-time data on movement, heart rate, and even kill site location. This big data approach allows us to detect conflict hotspots before a single lion is killed by a farmer. If a collar detects a lion approaching a livestock boundary, an alert can be sent to local communities, triggering a preemptive, non-lethal deterrent. We are attempting to use technology to build a digital buffer between two worlds that were never meant to touch. Yet, as we weave this high-tech safety net, a profound scientific question remains. In our quest to stabilize the population, are we inadvertently stripping the lion of its evolutionary agency? If we manage every birth, monitor every movement, and curate every gene, are we still protecting a wild species, or are we creating a biological monument? The science of survival is a race against time, a race to see if our capacity to understand life can outpace our capacity to destroy it. We are no longer just fighting for the lion. We are fighting to prove that we can be the stewards of a world we nearly broke. But even the most sophisticated genomic map and the most precise satellite telemetry are useless if the lion has nowhere left to step without triggering a human response. We can map their DNA, but we cannot map the human heart, and it is here, in the complex intersection of predator and person, that the true battle for survival is fought. If the laboratory is the brain of conservation, then the community is its soul. For decades, the strategy was simple: fence the lions in or fence the humans out. But as the golden horizons of the savanna shrink, we have learned that walls are not solutions, they are merely delays. To truly secure a future for the king, we must solve a riddle that has existed since the dawn of agriculture. How can a species that is biologically programmed to hunt livestock coexist with the people who depend on them for survival? This is the delicate art of community coexistence. It is a shift from defensive conservation to proactive integration. It begins with a fundamental change in how we value the predator. In many regions, a lion is seen purely through the lens of loss, a thief in the night that leaves behind a carcass and a broken livelihood. But a new paradigm is emerging, one that seeks to turn the lion from a liability into a community asset. One of the most successful, yet scientifically fascinating, methods involves the use of lion guardians. Local community members, often from pastoralist tribes like the Moss, who act as the bridge between two worlds. These are not just rangers, they are cultural translators. They use traditional ecological knowledge, passed down through generations, and marry it with modern monitoring. They track lion movements not just to protect the cats, but to protect the herds. When a pride moves toward a grazing area, the guardians alert the herders, allowing them to move their livestock preemptively. It is a dance of avoidance, a way to prevent the fatal encounter before it even begins. We are also seeing the rise of predator-proof innovation. In parts of East Africa, the implementation of bomas, livestock enclosures reinforced with heavy-duty metal sheeting and raised flooring, has drastically reduced retaliatory killings. By neutralizing the lion's ability to strike, we neutralize the human impulse to strike back. But perhaps the most profound shift is economic. We are seeing the development of conservation incentives, where the presence of a healthy lion population directly correlates to the prosperity of the local village. Through ecotourism and community-managed conservancies, the lion becomes a living engine for local development. When a pride thrives, schools are built, wells are dug, and clinics are funded. We are attempting to rewire the economic logic of the savanna, making a living lion more valuable to a farmer than a dead one. Yet this coexistence is a fragile equilibrium. It requires a constant, exhausting negotiation between the instinct of the hunter and the necessity of the human. It is a social contract written in the dust of the plains, one that is easily broken by a single hungry night or a single lost calf. As we move forward, we must realize that the survival of the lion does not depend solely on our ability to manage their genes or their habitats, but on our ability to manage our own relationship with the wild. To save the king, we must first learn to share the kingdom. But what happens when coexistence is not enough, and the kingdom itself has become too fragmented to support the weight of a dynasty? If coexistence is the art of living side by side, then rewilding is the radical act of reclaiming the lost. It is the attempt to stitch together a torn tapestry, reconnecting the isolated islands of wilderness that have been severed by roads, fences, and farms. For a lion, a fragmented landscape is a death sentence. When populations are isolated, they lose the ability to migrate, to find new mates, and to maintain the genetic flow necessary to prevent the slow decay of inbreeding. To rewild is to move beyond mere protection and toward the active restoration of ecological movement. This is not simply a matter of releasing animals into the wild. It is an intricate, high-stakes operation of biological engineering. One of the most profound challenges in rewilding is the founder effect, a genetic phenomenon where a new population is started by only a few individuals. If those few carry a limited genetic toolkit, the entire future of that kingdom is compromised from day one. To combat this, conservationists are engaging in genetic rescue, carefully selecting individuals from diverse lineages to ensure that the new kings and queens possess the immunological resilience and physical vigor required to survive the rigors of the savanna. The process often begins with the most difficult step, the translocation. This involves the capture and transport of apex predators across hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles. It is a surgical strike against extinction. Scientists look for empty or underpopulated habitats that possess the correct prey density and structural complexity to support a pride. But once the lions are released, the real work begins. They are not just being dropped into a landscape. They are being introduced into a complex, existing web of competition. Rewilding must account for the ghost of competition past. In many areas where lions have been absent for decades, the ecological niche has been occupied by other species, or the prey populations have shifted their migratory patterns. When we reintroduce a lion, we are reintroducing a biological force that reshapes everything it touches. Through a process known as a trophic cascade, the presence of the lion can actually alter the behavior of herbivores, preventing them from overgrazing certain areas, which in turn allows vegetation to flourish, creating habitats for birds, insects, and smaller mammals. The lion is the architect of the ecosystem's health. However, rewilding is also a gamble with high stakes. There is the risk of ecological mismatch, where the introduced lions struggle to adapt to the local climate or prey types. There is also the political risk. A rewilding project can fail instantly if a single translocated lion wanders into a nearby village, undoing years of the community coexistence we have fought so hard to build. Rewilding is, therefore, the ultimate test of our ambition. It is a recognition that we cannot simply preserve the world as it is. We must actively work to restore the world as it was meant to be. It is an attempt to undo the damage of the Anthropocene, one pride at a time, hoping that by restoring the kings, we might finally heal the broken rhythm of the wild. What if the most terrifying thing about a lion is not its roar, but its silence? If rewilding is our grand attempt to rewrite the future, then we must confront the haunting reality of what we are trying to bring back. We are not just reintroducing a predator, we are attempting to summon a ghost. For much of the African continent, the lion has transitioned from a living, breathing sovereign to a memory, a specter that haunts the edges of our consciousness, felt in the absence of its presence. To understand the ghost of the savanna, one must look at the ecological vacuum left behind by their departure. When a top predator vanishes, the landscape does not simply sit idle. It undergoes a silent, chaotic transformation. This is the ecology of fear in reverse. Without the lion to dictate the movement of herbivores, the landscape loses its structural discipline. Grazers like zebra and wildebeest no longer move in a strategic dance of avoidance. They settle, they overgraze, and they strip the land bare. The silence of the lion becomes the silence of a dying ecosystem, where the vibrant pulse of biodiversity is replaced by a monotonous, depleted wasteland. But the ghost is not just a metaphor for an empty habitat. It is a biological reality written into the very DNA of the survivors. In the fragmented pockets of wilderness that remain, we see the ghost of selection. In these isolated strongholds, the lack of gene flow creates a haunting phenomenon known as mutational meltdown. As small, disconnected prides are forced to mate with close relatives, deleterious, or harmful, genetic mutations begin to accumulate. These aren't always visible to the naked eye. A lion might look magnificent, a golden king of the scrub, but beneath the surface, its immune system may be failing, its reproductive success plummeting, or its skeletal structure weakening. They are living monuments to a vanishing lineage, physically present but biologically fading. Even more chilling is the ghost of the apex. The way the absence of lions alters the very chemistry of the savanna. Without the natural selection provided by lion predation, the health of prey populations can decline. Lions are the great cleaners of the wild. They cull the old, the sick, and the weak. Without them, diseases can sweep through herbivore populations with devastating speed, creating a cycle of instability that ripples through the entire food web. As we look across the horizon of the modern African wilderness, we see these ghosts everywhere. We see them in the empty corridors where migrations once thundered. We see them in the genetic shadows of the last remaining prides. We see them in the eyes of a species that has been pushed to the periphery of its own kingdom. The question that remains, as we stand at the precipice of this great restoration, is whether we can truly breathe life back into these shadows. Can we move beyond the haunting memory of the lion and create a world where their roar is once again a certainty, rather than a myth? Or are we merely chasing shadows, trying to reconstruct a majesty that has already slipped through our fingers? The fate of the savanna depends on whether we can turn these ghosts back into kings. Is the throne of the savanna truly lost? Or are we simply watching the slow, agonizing descent of a dynasty into myth? To arrive at a final verdict, we must strip away the romanticism of the predator and look at the cold, mathematical reality of their survival. We often speak of conservation in terms of numbers. How many lions are left? How many prides remain? But the true verdict is not found in a census. It is found in the connectivity of the world. A lion is not merely an animal, it is a biological anchor. When that anchor is severed, the entire ship of the ecosystem begins to drift. The scientific reality is daunting. We are currently witnessing a phenomenon known as extinction debt. This is a silent, delayed sentence passed upon a species. Even if we stop every poacher tomorrow and protect every acre of land today, the lions currently living in isolated pockets may already be biologically doomed. Because of the genetic bottlenecks we discussed, they are living on borrowed time, walking through a landscape that can no longer support the genetic diversity required for long-term resilience. We are not just fighting to save the individuals we see, we are fighting to outrun a mathematical certainty of decline. Yet the verdict is not yet written in stone. There is a flicker of defiance in the data. We are seeing the emergence of landscape-scale conservation. The realization that a fence is not a sanctuary, but a prison. The most successful efforts today are not focused on keeping lions in, but on letting them out. By creating transboundary corridors that allow for genetic rescue, the intentional movement of individuals between isolated populations to mimic natural dispersal, we are attempting to jumpstart the evolutionary engine that human expansion nearly stalled. We are also learning that the survival of the king depends entirely on the prosperity of the commoner. The most profound shift in modern conservation is the move from fortress conservation, fighting humans to save lions, to integrated coexistence. We are discovering that if a lion's presence can be transformed from a liability into an economic asset through community-led ecotourism, the species gains its most powerful ally, the very people who once viewed them as a threat. So, what is the final verdict? If we continue on our current trajectory, the lion will become a relic of the past, a magnificent golden ghost studied in digital archives, a creature that once ruled the world but lacked the space to breathe. The collapse of the kingdoms will be complete, leaving behind a hollowed-out Africa, a landscape of survivors but no masters. But there is another verdict possible. It is a verdict of agency. The collapse was not a natural disaster, it was a human imposition. Therefore, the restoration does not have to be a miracle, it can be a choice. The survival of the lion is the ultimate litmus test for our own species. It asks us, can we share a planet? Can we manage the chaos of our own expansion to leave room for the wild? The kings are waiting, the throne is empty. The verdict is not in the hands of nature, but in ours.